Hello, hello. Welcome to my Dragon's Dogma 2 review, sort of. This is going to be another art gripe, so for those of you that do not know, I draw a thing, and I time-lapse, and then I ramble over it. I don't have a script, I don't have any sense, and here we go. Alright, so, first things first, I've actually been wanting to do another art gripe for a while now, but the thing that I had actually wanted to do was to just start rambling about life in general, because a lot of things have been going on lately, I suppose, and I enjoy processing things and thinking about them and just talking. But so many other things have been happening lately that I decided I'd probably better do my job. So to that end, we're doing Dragon's Dogma, which is fine by me because I actually really like Dragon's Dogma. I played the first game quite a bit. I played the second game quite a bit as well. Technically, I still have not beaten it, as in I haven't seen the ending credits roll, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But the general gist of it, first off, is it is a game worth playing. It is going to be frustrating for some of you. If you are like me, though, you will greatly enjoy it, even though it will have some flaws that are worth evaluating, which is what the majority of my videos are sort of about. It's me enjoying something, but then having some sort of criticism of it, not for the sake of being mean, but simply for the sake of trying to determine what it is about the thing that you're enjoying and how it could be even more enjoyable, that sort of thing. So, Dragon's Dogma. First off, I will mention that I played the first game, of course, quite a bit. First game, not to go into the details of its history and stuff, because I'm not that privy to it. But my understanding is that it was a mess in terms of its development because they were trying to do too many things. And it did not quite succeed in Japan, its origin. It mainly got a sequel because of its popularity in the West, from what I gather. It did, however, get an MMO, a short-lived one, over there, but it did not ever come over here, and I never got to play it. I did want to try it out, but I missed that boat by a pretty good amount. So I don't really know anything about that. In Dragon's Dogma 1, however, one of the main things about Dragon's Dogma, you might be wondering, well, what the heck is it, if you don't know anything about it? Because some of you are going to be watching this and well, I don't care about Dragon's Dogma, but I want to hear him ramble about something. Well, here we go. I know that you're probably, taking a shit, or, you're cooking a meal, or you're running, or you're just sitting at work just wondering what to do. That sort of thing. That's fine. I do that too. So, I'll give a little bit of an explanation. My explanation is thus: Dragon's Dogma is sort of like if you're playing like a FromSoft style game. It's a third-person, action game. It's not exactly fast, so it sort of has the same pacing as like a Dark Souls game in a sense, unless you're playing Warrior or something of that nature. You can do a lot of weird things, though. For example, if you're roaming around Dark Souls, you're not going to be picking up people and throwing them off cliffs, which is something that you're probably going to be doing on a regular basis in Dragon's Dogma. You might see someone wandering down the road and decide, I'm going to play with this person. Or, it doesn't even have to be an enemy, it can be an NPC. So you'll just pick them up and carry them around with you, and maybe you'll even introduce them to a friend of yours because you think that they'll be compatible, who knows. Or you'll just throw them off a cliff to their death. Who knows, just whatever you feel like doing. In combat, you can do the same thing with enemies. You stagger them, and once they're staggered, you can just pick them up and carry them around. Have a good time with them. Goes for dogs, goblins, whatever. Also, you can climb all over enemies. That goes for most things that are fairly large. I think the smallest thing that you could probably do that to would be something that's kind of the size of like a warg from Lord of the Rings. Like a big, super dog, basically. You can't really do it to smaller things like wolves and so on, or people. But if they're somewhat sizable, yeah, you can climb all over them. put your little grubby mitts all over them if you want to, which is also pretty fun. So if it's like a Cyclops or something, you can climb up to the top of that Cyclops and check out that big beady little eye and bop him on the nose. Or, well, actually, he doesn't have a nose, that's true. You bop him on his eye, and he doesn't like it. And same thing goes for, like, chimeras or whatever. Sometimes, like a chimera, for example, is, in this game anyways, a lion that has a goat head on its back, and also its tail is a snake. So you can cut off the snake tail, and you can disable the goat head, and if it upsets you, the idea of beating a goat... It's an asshole goat, though. Like, he's being a real dick. So I don't feel too bad about it. You can knock him out, and you can also actually, even though it looks like the lion is like the main body, you can even knock out, like kill, the lion head before dealing with the other ones, which is super weird, seeing its like limp head like, bobbing around as the body is jumping all over the place. Very strange. So there's this little, like, it's a game where you have to knock out specific areas of a monster sometimes that help a lot. If a big Cyclops has armor on, you have to sometimes like knock off the armor in order to be able to climb up, to be able to get to the higher parts of its body. There's also like golems that you cannot damage at all because they're just rocks, without hitting these specific little magical seals on their bodies. Presumably that's how they're made or something. And sometimes they're positioned in very weird areas where there's almost no way to hit them unless you are specifically climbing and then grappling onto that specific spot. Or you are just have really good aim, or really good timing. Things like that. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, is he talking about... Also, I hope you can't hear my stomach rumbling. I haven't eaten yet. You might be wondering to yourself, is he talking about Dragon's Dogma 1 or 2? Yes. Yes, that's part of the problem, actually. In Dragon's Dogma 1, there was a very overt shortage of enemy types. And that is obviously because given how much you can interact with them, and how many animations there have to be for like interpolating between animation sets and so on, it's probably pretty difficult to make one enemy that has so many variations on things that can happen to it. And to that end, Dragon's Dogma 2 has a very small enemy pool. So if that bothers you, it is going to bother you. For me, I noticed it. It doesn't bother me quite that much, although it can get very samey. Anytime I come across one of the rare enemies, like I would consider like a Lich, for example, to be sort of a rare enemy in Dragon's Dogma 2. So whenever I come across one, it's like, oh yeah, that thing. I forgot. I think you can also encounter like a Dullahan, but I've never seen one, ever. I think there's actually 2 enemies that are marked as question marks in my log, because I've just never seen them before. I'll spot them eventually. Like I said, I haven't beaten the game quite yet, but you get the idea. So the enemy pool is very restricted in Dragon's Dogma 2. So the core to the experience is going to be twofold. It's going to be the gameplay, and it's going to be the exploration. And in Dragon's Dogma 1, I would say... I always hated replaying Dragon's Dogma 1 in the front end. One, I didn't really like its map. Because in Dragon's Dogma 1, you started out at this little island, or not island, this little village, and you would run from that one to a fort, and then from the fort to the main town. And the main town was sort of a hub where you went out and explored from. And beyond that, there really wasn't too much. You could go out west, like northwest, and there was this big open area there, but the enemy density was kind of sparse. There was a little bit to the north that was like in some ruins, but there really wasn't much of anything there. So you could definitely feel the fact that the game was not incredibly prepared to be itself. It felt kind of empty sometimes, and a lot of the densities sometimes could be front-loaded in the main game, so it could get kind of frustrating having to deal with it. Once the DLC came out, Bitter Black Isles, that also could get a bit frustrating because that, in a sense, that became the real game. Because that's where most of, that's where all the good gear was, obviously, because it's DLC. And if you wanted to level up quickly, that also is where you would go almost immediately in order to start getting levels early. Otherwise, it kind of felt like you were wasting your time. I lost my thought. That's what it was. Also, to that effect, something I'll mention in Dragon's Dogma 1, because this is going to be sort of important to factor into 2. In 1, there was this sort of frustrating way of leveling up. There are things in Dragon's Dogma 1 and 2 called vocations, which is like a class system. You can be a warrior, you can be a fighter, you can be a mage or a sorcerer, and so on. And in 1, whenever you have this vocation set and you level up, then sort of like Oblivion, like Elder Scrolls Oblivion, your stats will be permanently affected. And if you're, say, a sorcerer at the time, then your magic will go up and your strength will not go up. So if you want to make sure that your character is always getting the optimal stat growth for whatever it is that you plan on doing later on in the game, then you want to make sure that you are very, very carefully controlling your vocations. So you might think to yourself, well, I'll go to Bitter Black Isles and I'll level myself up from 1 to level 200, because that was the cap, until I get to whatever the max is, and then I can freely switch between my vocations. You can, but unfortunately, like going into the stats and stuff, it's kind of complicated in Dragon's Dogma 1 as far as what the amount is that you want, because you can actually kind of gimp yourself, unfortunately, by having too low of a defense, too low of a magic defense, or not having enough stamina. So if you equip the wrong vocation and just blast through the game on that vocation and that alone, then you can end up harming yourself in the sense of you have great strength ratings, but your stamina is terrible, or you have excellent magic, but you decide later on in the game, well, I want to play warrior character, and now your damage is not going to be quite as good. That sort of thing. The flip side of this was the consistent argument online that this did not matter, because most of where all your damage and everything comes from is going to be your gear, not your stats. So there was this consistent, frustrating debate online on whether or not it mattered at all, whether you should pay attention to it, and sometimes whenever you were, if someone new shows up on the forums or the subreddit, they would ask, what should I be doing about this? You would get two different kinds of people. You get almost sort of this gripe versus positive or toxic positivity sort of thing going on, where you get one group of people that would say, oh, just play the game, have fun, it doesn't matter at all, never worry about it, which for some people would inadvertently ruin the game for them, because then they would get to a point where they're like, well, I would like to have this amount of strength, because I can actually tell that it's taking me 6 hits to kill this enemy instead of the 5 that I think it needs, or this, whatever it is. Just there's a certain satisfaction that you get for some people where you are optimizing certain elements of it. Like min-maxing can be fun. And especially knowing, like watching a video and going, oh, that guy killed this thing super fast, how did he do that? And realizing, well, it's just that it stacked up so much, like all the hits that he was doing. over the span of like a 2 or 3 minute long fight. Because fights in Dragon's Dogma, both games, can go on for quite a ways. It's not a game where you have like a 30-second long boss fight. You can be there for probably a good, 10 minutes sometimes. It just kind of depends. If you're really geared up, then yeah, it's not going to take long at all. But they might see that and be really excited about it, and they decide, I'm going to try that. And then they realize they got some bad advice on the subreddit, whenever they first started playing. And now they just can't. They can't hit those stat thresholds that they wanted. And, as a result, they just have to start the whole game over with. And you'll get other people that, you get the inverse. Where they think, I don't care about this stuff at all, and someone is telling them, well, no, you have to be prepared. You have to be very carefully prepared. Here's a stat planner. Go here and determine what it is that you're going to want to do, and go from there. Be sure to level up this vocation from level 13 to level 21, and then switch over to this one vocation for one level exactly, and then switch over to this other one. And it becomes a nightmare, and that makes the game experience just ruined for them. There are two extremes. The thing that I always would say is, this goes for almost any game that has this sort of debate structure to it. If the argument is it doesn't matter that this system is in place, then my response has always been, well, if it doesn't matter, then get rid of it. Because if it doesn't matter that someone doesn't need to optimize their stat growth or whatever, then you shouldn't mind it not existing at all. And of course, usually people get really uppity about that. That meme of the, 4 panels, a little dot-eyed face that gets the angry eyebrows at the very end? Whatever, I'm not going to show it on screen. You know what I'm talking about. Like, oh, maybe this then, and then it shifts from a blank face to a really angry face because, well, you weren't supposed to say that. That's what I always imagine. It's just a problem that never needed to exist. So anyways, that's Dragon's Dogma 1. It can be a problem sometimes because it's a mishmash of a lot of ideas that sort of worked, but not really. It was a great idea for a game, but it didn't quite hit all the marks. And the funny thing is, you can tell that the developers didn't really understand why it succeeded. Because, it didn't really succeed that much in Japan. It was more of a sort of a Western success title from what I gather. So I'm sure that they, upon realizing, hey, we can make a lot of money if we just do this again, they proceeded from there and thought, well, what do we do to it? And the follow-up was just do it again, I guess. So, if you're playing Dragon's Dogma 2 from 1, you're going to notice a lot of similarities. A lot of the same vocations. There's 1 or 2 new ones. There's actually some that have been removed, and there's some that have been combined into other vocations. But more or less, it plays almost exactly the same. The enemies are almost exactly the same. And that thing that I was talking about, the stat growth thing, is also still technically present in the game. But it is even more diminished than it was in the first game. To which, of course, I say, well, just get rid of it entirely. I don't understand why they keep doing that. There's no sense in it being there. I mean, it's barely noticeable now. But my response to that, of course, is not, well, it doesn't matter, so don't worry about it. It's just get rid of it then. So if you really, really want to optimize your character, you can. You can optimize the hell out of it. Because most of your stuff is going to be coming from gear anyways. And more importantly, in Dragon's Dogma 2, there are, I think, hard caps on what your stats can grow to. I forget what it is. I think it's like 450 or 400. And you can use certain things that boost your stats to 50, plus 50. I can't quite remember. But anyways, you can keep leveling up. I haven't got to this point yet, but supposedly there is no level cap in Dragon's Dogma 2. You can just go up to 999. It's like playing Dark Souls. So even if you do maladapt your stats in your mind, you can just keep leveling up forever and ever, and eventually every single one of your stats is going to hit that threshold, and you're just not going to have to worry about it. Which, to me, I kind of have this problem in the Souls games as well. I know it's a staple of the Souls games. I really wish that they had a level cap of some sort. Me personally, I really like building things, like having a build, and having restrictions enough that you have to work around it. Now, that can go wrong, like in Dark Souls 1, for example, it's almost impossible to do anything without having the Havel's ring equipped, which is the thing that makes your equipment, it allows you to have more equipment. You almost can't do anything with your equipment slots at all unless you have Havel's equipped. I think they definitely screwed up how much weight that you should be able to carry in one, and Havel's ring was just the band-aid for that. So almost everyone running around has Havel's strapped to one of those ring slots. And that became a little bit less bad in the sequels and so on. But I've always appreciated games where you have a set amount of points, but you can re-roll them. So with Dragon's Dogma style games where everything is permanent, I don't care for that as much as a game where you can either re-roll, which is not my preference actually, or you... That's the thing about Dragon's Dogma 2, it almost does this. Or you just switch to the class and you have to level up that specific class, and then once you have that specific class leveled up, that's what's controlling most of the stat growth. So you don't just re-roll. Like, for example, in Dark Souls, you decide, I don't want to be a fighter type anymore. I want to cast spells. And you're at level, 120 or whatever, and you use one of your, 2 precious respec tokens because FromSoft are assholes. And you respec your stats into Sorcerer, and you've never used it before. You don't know anything about it. And you just walk around and now you're casting high-level spells. And you have no clue what you're doing. To me, that's the wrong way of handling it. I would much rather it be that you have to learn how to do that thing, but then once you master it, then you can switch to it. And in Dragon's Dogma 2, that's sort of how it works. Because in addition to stat growth not being such a big deal on your vocations, a lot of your stats switch whenever you switch vocations. So you'll go from having a stat sort of bonus on a vocation like Warrior, where most of your stats have strength in it. And whenever you switch over to Mage, it'll actually reallocate some of those baseline stats to Magic, for example. But it's not the whole package, so it's a little bit messy. Some of them are permanent, but not many. I think it's a 13% difference. Fighting Cowboy, I think it was, did some testing on that. And some of it is the vocation thing, and some of it is the gear. So it's a little bit messy. It's not a big deal. But again, if it's not a big deal, get rid of it. Anyways, you get the idea. So, let's talk a little bit about open worlds. I love talking about open world games. So here is my thoughts on that. I haven't done it yet, but I know there's been a survey recently of them asking what are people enjoying. Do you like this particular kind of map, or do you like Dragon's Dogma 1 maps? The thing about Dragon's Dogma 1 is that it was a lot of linear paths, especially Bitter Black Isles. And there was an open world in a sense, but a lot of it was very flat, and it was very empty. And the problem in Dragon's Dogma 2, if you consider it a problem, this is going to vary from person to person, is it's a big open world, and it can be kind of confusing to walk around in. Because let's say that you just step out of town, you walk down a little lane, just one lane, you can't go anywhere, and then you come out to the big open world. And if you look forward, there's a road going forward to the next town, more or less. It splits off into like a dozen different paths, some of them big, some of them small. And to your immediate right, you'll notice there's a cliff. And to your left, you'll notice that there's a cliff. And you can sort of climb up that cliff. And let's say that you climb up that cliff, and then you look over, and then there's a cave. Or you look down on the other side of the cliff, and there's an entirely different area. And you look down to your left, and there's some stuff to gather, and like a little encampment. And then you'll look up a little bit, and you'll notice, oh, there's even more stuff above me. How do I even get up to it? And you realize, oh, if I'm this specific class, I can't. So there are some classes that can, like, in Dragon's Dogma 1, you could double jump as like the thief style vocation. And that one returns in 2, but you can't do that anymore. You can do weird things like use concussive alongside skull splitter, and that can sort of get you a little bit of elevation. But if you're a caster, like a sorcerer or a mage, you can sort of float with your little stick and float a little bit up so that you can actually grab ledges. And that is one of the things that you can use to reach areas that you're not quite supposed to be able to reach. If you don't have that, then you just can't do it. So it's sort of a reward, I guess, for using this particular kind of vocation. There's one or two little tricks you can use on other vocations to gain a little bit of height, but it's a little bit frustrating. This is one of those things I really wish they had not done. Because you'll see a chest, and you'll be thinking, especially early on in the game, how do I get to that chest? I can very clearly see it. It's on this little island that's too high to jump. Is there something nearby that I can, like, throw myself off of to get to it? And the answer is no. There's something in the game that's like a harpy smoke signal to where you can attract harpies to yourself, which is a flying enemy. And you can grab onto them, and you can sort of fly over there, but it's really complicated setting it up, and there may not even be enemies nearby that can do that. Again, if it's not a big deal, don't do it. And that's one of my more general problems with exploration in Dragon's Dogma 2, is it's definitely a game you can explore and you can miss still quite a few things. To me, I like exploring to some degree. With open world games, I have a lot of thoughts on open world games. If you want more of them, go check out my Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom videos, which are more about weapon durability and my general thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom, but I do get into it a little bit. Because the gist of it is that open world games are big open parking lots where there's really nothing in it that's that interesting, but there's a lot of it. And it's more of a game type that is for people that like casual, incidental discoveries, where they feel like they've discovered something, but it's nothing important, but that doesn't really bother them. They just like them moving around, and they like the sort of directionless, or the directed, they like the directed but not really important elements of the gameplay, where they're being told to go do something, because the moment that they run out of things that the game is telling them to go do, they don't know what to do with themselves. So if you give them a big open world, and you have lots of things that you don't tell them the location of, or even that there's something even there, then they feel like it's just infinite replayability, because they never quite know if they've done everything. For people that are more completionist-oriented, they want to make sure that they have done everything. People like me, to some degree, I'm not as bad as I used to be. It's much more frustrating. Not because you don't know that all the things are done, but because, for example, if it's me and I walk into a big open map, then my brain immediately goes, okay, I'm going to divide this into sections. It looks like here's an island, here's a canyon, here's a river. I'm going to go like left to right or up or down, whatever works. And I'm going to procedurally mark out and make sure that I understand every little section so that I can gather everything in it to make sure that I have completed this area. And then once I have completed the area to my satisfaction, then I can go back to it whenever I want, knowing all the items have been completed, and I can just enjoy killing all the enemies and just wandering around and throwing them off cliffs and whatever else it is that I want to do. Just going to have a big old blast. Because with me, I don't mind the fact that I have quote-unquote 100% completed an area or a game. I can continue to enjoy it. I don't care about that. To me, the enjoyment of the game has always been in the gameplay. It's been in my ability to engage with whatever systems that the game has and play with them. So the more well-rounded the actual gameplay is, the more tools I have access to that will allow me to do all sorts of crazy things that my imagination can come up with. Which is why I like Dragon's Dogma 1 for the most part. Is because there's a lot of different things that you can do, and with all these weird systems of being able to grapple onto enemies and pick them up and throw them, and even some other like minor oddball interactions like getting enemies wet, or the fact that weapons can bounce off of them if they're the wrong strike type, and things like that. It led to a lot of things that you could do creatively in that game. And there's also a lot of things like throwable items. For example, there's an enemy in Bitter Black Isles called Death. It's just Death. It's a floating, what you would imagine. Just a guy with a scythe, and he is not happy that you are there. You can fight this thing, drop its health bars. It can one-shot kill you if you get hit with the wrong attack, which it spams all the time. And it will vanish after a certain amount of damage, and you'll see it again later, and so on and so on. And you eventually beat it. That's the intended thing. But you can also take like a bunch of blast powder, which is an item that you can throw at an enemy, and it sort of stuns it and pushes it back a little bit. And you can get Death near a cliff, and then you can just throw blast in its face over and over again until it pushes Death off a cliff so that it dies. This is one of the weird little things that people know fairly well in Dragon's Dogma 1. You can do that sort of stuff. And it's fun being able to do that. I love that. And that brings me to something else. I have seen some people complaining, probably, FromSoft style players, about how the game is too easy, and they're just done with it too quickly, because you can overgear yourself to the point where the game just is invalidated. You're killing most basic enemies in like 1 or 2 hits, and even the bosses take like seconds to defeat and so on. And to me, that's not a problem, because I can make the conscious decision not to do that. And this loops back into my whole, if it's not a problem, then, don't do it thing. Some people just don't have that. You could also view it from the inverse of, well, it doesn't need to have that problem. I agree, getting into a bit of some weeds here. Need to take a drink. Here's the problem. When you're gearing up in Dragon's Dogma, the game desperately needs transmog. Like, it desperately needed it. Dragon's Dogma 1 never got it. So, you eventually got to the endgame, and you had like there was a best in slot piece of gear for every class, every vocation. So a lot of people, you could always tell, a lot of people were running around and they all looked like the same person. I hate that in any game. It doesn't matter what it is. You get to the end game and everyone looks like the same exact person because there was one piece of gear that everyone used. Transmog does fix that to some degree. Again, though, I'm the kind of person that loves builds. I love building classes and coming up with ideas on how things work, and Like, I play Guild Wars 1 constantly because it's like a Magic the Gathering style system where things work, all the skills work together in very oddball ways. So you can make builds that do crazy things. It was a game that really appealed to my creativity. Love games like that. Losing my train of thought. Dragon's Dogma 2 has that same problem where eventually you will get to the end game and there is one piece of gear that is the best in slot. Every so often there's like one or two other things that you could argue can be good for certain things, but generally it's just one piece of thing. I don't like that. Now, the thing is, though, the game is so easy that you can drop down, one or two gear slots, and it just doesn't matter, because there's no hard mode yet. Dragon's Dogma 1 had a hard mode eventually added to it, and its DLC was much more difficult, so you kind of had to move up your gear slots. And the DLC, of course, had its own gear that you could get, and so on. So it's another one of those, it's not technically a problem, but it's just a problem that doesn't need to exist. I would much rather that, hell, you could upgrade every piece of gear in the game to have in-game stats in some way. Now, whether that's by doing transmog or by just upgrading the armor, I would really rather it not be the armor, because I don't want a Dark Souls situation where their idea of grinding is, oh, you want to upgrade every weapon in the game because you want to freely interchange between them? Well, prepare for like a nightmarish 20-year-long grind where you're farming slabs for one enemy. Or you only get 3 slabs in every new game cycle, so you have to beat the game 500 times. This stupid FromSoft bullshit that doesn't need to exist, but people do, support it anyways because, hey, you don't need all those weapons. What's the big deal? Why are you're never going to use that short sword? And if you're like me, you're like, well, I do want to use the short sword sometimes, even if it's as a joke or anything. I still want it prepared. And then they'll say, well, if you're going to do that, you don't actually need it fully upgraded, do you? Which, again, it doesn't need to be a problem. It never needed to be an issue. Why do you keep doing it? But you get the idea. Dragon's Dogma 2 does not need to have those sorts of problems. There's no reason for it. But that can be your solution. If the game is just too easy for you, then drop down some gear slots. Don't take it quite as intense. But if you're also the kind of person that's like, but it's the best gear, I want to have it. I don't want to do that. I want the game to do it for me. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're creating, I know the game is creating half your problems, you're creating the other half. You are also being part of the problem. Which, I get, it's also a thing that does not need to be a problem, but it is. That would be the solution. You're not even trying to do it. There are many things in games that I don't like. I will still try to rectify them as best as I can. And some of that rectification is cheating. Which brings me to another point. It is not a multiplayer game. You can't play with other people. Which sort of disappointed me whenever I heard it, but I understood it because Dragon's Dogma is also a game that uses like slow motion. Like whenever you kill a big enemy or you hit it with a really big critical hit, the game will like slow down, which you could do in multiplayer, but it can create some like synchronization issues and stuff. So it's a safety net. It's just nice to not have to worry about those things as a developer, I'm sure. But anyways, there is multiplayer in the sense that people can use your pawns, like your little partners that you bring with you. You create your own, and those can move between games and go help other players in their world if they recruit them and so on. So there is a multiplayer component, which is very fun. It exists. Anyways. Getting near the end of this drawing here. This character, I didn't even explain. This character is basically the Mercedes of this game. There was a character named Mercedes in Dragon's Dogma 1 who was like everyone's little waifu. She was basically just Casca from Berserk, very overtly so. And in this game, they added the Beastren, who are like a sort of a cat-themed people, which is good news for me. And this is basically that version of that character, that sort of character trope. I forget what her name is. I'll have it in the description. It's like Menella or something like that. I don't remember. But she is a nice lady. I like her personality. And everyone that I have talked to is like, oh yeah, she's cool. Because she is a lady, but she's extremely capable and strong and brave, and I like those things. I like them. So I decided to draw her. Also, her design looks pretty cool. She's very nice looking in game. I actually finished this drawing and then went back and looked at her in game, and I thought, actually, she doesn't really even look like that. She's more white, but her face has more darkness to it on the nose and the eyes, and her patterning is a little bit differently. And I thought, should I go back and try to rectify that some? And then I thought, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to Dragon's Dogma it, and I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Because some things are problems, but I'll just leave them be. Because that's in the spirit of things. Anyways, point being, Dragon's Dogma, the open world could be a little bit better for me because it's very messy. Trying to traverse the world in Dragon's Dogma 2 is very messy. You will be falling down a lot. It's kind of hard to explore because you're never quite sure if you can reach a place or not, which to some people is great. For people like me, it's very frustrating because it means you're going to be missing on things a lot. But also at the same time, a lot of the things that you're going to be missing are treasure chests with things in them that you just don't care about. They don't matter. Which is also sort of frustrating to me because I like having a good payoff of there's a weapon here, there's a piece of armor here, it all matters. Very rarely are there things in the field that you actually want to get. Which means that you might miss those, but they're so rare that you might not even think about it. And almost all the things that you actually do care about, like the actual in-game sort of gear, is going to be so far in, and it's going to be isolated to one merchant that you're just not going to care about that either. So just, again, that is my theme. It doesn't need to be a problem, just stop doing that stuff. So, my preferred open world is actually, I've described it as like Zelda, like playing Ocarina of Time, in the sense of, it's a lot of semi-linear paths that open up into much larger areas that you can explore. Like, I imagine Hyrule Field, and I usually compare it to that. Dragon's Dogma 1 actually did sort of have that. To me, the open areas are too big in both games. It's hard to compartmentalize where you are exploring and how to grid things out. I like being able to go, this is an area, this is an area, this is an area. They're enclosed, they don't overlap too much, so I know where they're going to intersect, so I know where to go, how to explore it, how to ensure that I have fully explored it. Whereas Dragon's Dogma 2 feels like you're exploring the surface of a piece of popcorn, if that makes any sense. Imagine a piece of popcorn, and it really feels like you've been dropped on it, and you're trying desperately to climb to the top, and then when you get to the top, you're looking over and going, wait, is this the top? Is that a canyon down there? Is there something over there? That's what it feels like. The entire game world feels like that. As opposed to like you're playing Ocarina of Time and you're walking out in Hyrule Field and you're like, everything is flat. It's curved, there are hills, but I can see that it's still a flat surface. There's no weird iterations, like things for me to fall into besides like secret holes or whatever. And there are no big cliffs to climb up that might have things on top of them. Maybe they don't. Maybe I'm intended to get up there. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. It's just clear what you want to do. The general gameplay of Dragon's Dogma 2, great. I enjoy it. Does it have some flaws? Yes. Because a lot of the skills are useless or are straight up inferior to other skills. So I kind of see a lot of people using the exact same skills. For example, in Dragon's Dogma 1, if you're playing Warrior, it had a skill that let you basically just creep around on the ground, charging up a really big hit, and the longer you charged, the more damage it did. So you could actually just sit there holding that weapon attack for like 5 minutes. And whenever it connected, it really connected. It was not fun to do that, to crawl around on the ground trying to do that. But the payoff was fun, so some people would go through the bother. It was not a well-designed class. It is much better in Dragon's Dogma 2, but it lacks those little insipid and intricate little things that you can do in that sense. It is not watered down, it is different. It is mostly the same, but it is safer. So, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a very safe, pleasant experience. If you're looking for a challenge, you are not going to find it unless you artificially create that challenge for yourself. So if you're a FromSoft player that's like, oh, this was the greatest experience ever because I died 50 times, and I had to run back 50 times, and I just kept doing it, and I fought the same boss for days until I memorized everything about it, you're not going to find that in Dragon's Dogma. And thank God for that. Because I so greatly value the experience of just enjoying myself and being able to relax in games. And so many games have forgotten that. So many developers have forgotten it. So many fans have forgotten that. That video games are meant to be enjoyed. Is Dragon's Dogma always easy, though? No, it's not. It has lots of little mechanics that are going to ensure that it can be frustrating sometimes. But it's a video game. It's just a classic video game, where you enjoy it for the most part. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of a struggle here and there, especially if you're Trickster and you run into a sequence where the game forces you into a 1v3, which has happened to some people. But for the most part, it is just an old-fashioned video game where you're going to enjoy yourself. And you can create a lot of your own challenges, which I definitely appreciate. I hope that it releases DLC. I'm sure that it will. I hope that it is not inherently focused on being difficult, though. Ever since Dark Souls 1, I've really detested what has become with games like this, where developers are listening to people whining about how hard everything needs to be, and how they need to die a million times in order to feel anything anymore. Ugh, you will die in Dragon's Dogma. Don't worry, you'll die. You can get your little fetish in. But for the most part, it is a game that is more suited for people like me, where it has some flaws, but it is more about the creativity of approaching things versus anything else. Like there's a class in the game called Trickster that deals no damage whatsoever that I actually have not started playing just yet. I'm going to start today, actually. And it does things like it just makes walls, or it makes surfaces, and it baits enemies onto those surfaces so that you can pull the rug out from under them and they all drop off a cliff in Looney Tunes fashion. It's all about your creativity and trying to play chess with the enemies without actually damaging them. That's what I like about this game. It's a good game. It is worth playing. Anyways, like I said, I wanted to do an art gripe where I was... I have actually been wanting to do an art gripe where I'm just talking about life in general and my thoughts and what's been affecting me lately and things of that nature. I'll get to it eventually, but Dragon's Dogma came out and I just had to do it. I had to do it. Alright. Hope you guys enjoyed this art video. Hope you enjoyed Menella, whatever the hell her name is. She's a nice lady. I romanced her. I haven't gotten the romance ending cutscene again. That's another thing that's the same from 1 to 2. The exact same system with the exact same problems. People are reporting that whenever they get to the ending, whatever the thing is where it has the payoff, where this is your love interest. This is who had the most affection for you. Sometimes they'll just get some dirty dwarf that they interacted with one time, and no one knows why they're getting that character. It has the exact same jankiness. It feels almost exactly the same. And you could tell that they were not confident about why the first game succeeded, so they just did everything the same, 1-to-1 as best as they could get it. Which is kind of funny to me, a little bit frustrating, but also kind of endearing. So anyways, especially if you played 1, it is worth playing. I played it at least one time on Twitch, but I didn't keep playing it because I didn't want to ruin the experience for myself. You can find the VOD on my unlisted playlists. Enjoy that there if you so desire. I might stream it again in the future, but we will see. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.